He didn't slam the door. That would have been honest. He didn't throw words like knives or fling one last apology across the living room like a broken plate. He simply placed his key on the kitchen counter, quiet as a confession, smoothed the collar of his blue button-down like he was rehearsing normal life, and said the sentence that would cauterize a whole future. I don't want to be a father. 8 months pregnant, I stood in the doorway wearing my swollen exhaustion like armor that didn't fit, and heard the soft click of the hallway light as he left our apartment in Harborview, Baltimore, and walked into an elevator that swallowed him whole. No echo at all. He had been the man who sang harmony with the radio, who folded pizza boxes flat before tossing them, who pressed his palm to my belly and whispered, "Hey, little comet," when the baby kicked. I'd memorized his small rituals the way you memorize exits on a freeway, just in case. But rituals tell you nothing about a person's escape routes. I didn't know he kept a separate checking account under a 3-letter LLC. I didn't know he'd made a promise to someone else long before he promised me anything. I didn't know about the men who meet in the back room of St. Bartholomew's after Wednesday night service, the ones who call themselves sovereigns and smile like they've swallowed the rules and licked their fingers clean. I didn't know he'd chosen them over us. The night he left, the radiator hissed like a warning. My ankles were balloons. My breath had a hitch I didn't recognize. I stared at the key he'd abandoned, the same brass thing that had let him into my life, our plans, the baby registry, my fantasies of quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and cartoons. I waited for the panic, for the ugly sobbing, for the collapse. But what arrived instead was a ringing clarity, like the first cold of January. Some part of me, older than romance, tougher than vows, said, "Move, check the bank, call your mother, hide the spare credit card, check your pulse. You are not the one who is leaving." So, I moved. And the further I moved, the more I realized this wasn't just one man's cowardice. It was a corridor with many doors. Landlords who raise rent when they smell maternity. Employers who schedule double shifts after you announce your due date. Friends who shift their weight from foot to foot and say, "Well, he warned you he wasn't ready." It was a script I hadn't written starring a woman I was just now meeting. Someone with a spine like braided steel. Someone who would give birth under emergency lights if she had to. Someone who would learn to keep receipts like a historian and love like a lighthouse. You can call her a single mom. I call her my origin story. If you think you know how this ends, you don't. If you think he stayed gone, you're only half right. If you think the last words he spoke were, "I don't want to be a father," you've never heard a man choke on his own signature in a hospital hallway. The twist? It wasn't just him running from a baby. It was a whole quiet machine humming beneath our city, greased by loopholes and smiling advice, built for disappearing acts. But machines break. And when they do, it's loud. Tonight, I'll tell you how the door closed. I'll tell you what opened. And I'll tell you the part people always skip. The way a voice on a 911 line became my midwife. The way a grandmother I'd never met stood in a doorway with a casserole and a truth. The way an infant's fist unclenched. And the world moved over to make space. Because it did. Because I made it. My name is Maren Hayes. I am 30 years old, a night shift unit clerk at Mercy Harbor Hospital, and I live 2 blocks from the water on a street where fire escapes lace the brick like metal ivy. When I found out I was pregnant, it was a Wednesday, and the espresso machine at the nurse station spit steam like an angry cat. I was charting admissions, half listening to an elderly man explain to a security guard that his heart was fine. It was the world that kept breaking. I laughed because I thought he was being dramatic. Later, I would wonder if he had been prophesying for me. Elliot, yes, that's his name, worked sales for a logistics startup that promised overnight miracles and delivered late packages and painted apologies. He wore nice shoes and a wristwatch that gently announced he valued time in a way that suggested he might respect mine. The first night he came over, he noticed I kept my flour in a glass jar and asked if he could label it with my label maker. It was a small miracle to be seen like that. People think love is fireworks. For me, it was a man who knew where to put the flower. We met in August, talked in September, planned in October. By December, there was a heartbeat fluttering on a screen, and a nurse named Crystal squeezing my hand saying, "There you are, little comet," because I had told her what Elliot whispered the night before. Everyone clapped at the tiny blips of sound, like someone had popped bubble wrap in a sacred room. I brought the first ultrasound photo home, slid it under a magnet shaped like Maryland, and we took turns saying our favorite names like kids trading baseball cards. We made a spreadsheet. We argued about car seats. I bought a second-hand crib from a woman named Paisley who kissed my cheeks and told me to call if I ever wanted company. A city can be 1,000 small kindnesses. I didn't know I'd soon be collecting them the way some people collect debt. Here's where I pause to tell you. If you're watching this, if you've found your way to my voice and my story, I want you with me, not just as a spectator, but as a witness. Single mothers are the most analyzed and the least believed people I know. We are data points in someone else's study and cautionary tales in someone else's mouth. Not tonight. Tonight you're in my kitchen. You'll feel the draft under the window, smell the cinnamon rolls I made because I needed the oven's heat to argue with January, and hear the hallway elevator ping like a pulse every time it stops. You'll watch me learn the choreography. Carry, breathe, call, prove, lift, repeat. You'll watch me fight. The gentle kind. The paperwork kind. The kind that leaves no bruise in every bruise. Before I take you into the night he left, I need to invite you into something else. Response. If you've ever been abandoned at the edge of your own life, tell me where you are watching from. Comment your city, your corner, your kitchen table, your parking lot outside a night shift. Subscribe, because I will keep telling the truth the way a lighthouse repeats itself, again, again, again. And share this with the person who needs to hear that survival can sound like silence before it sounds like thunder. I'm not interested in pity. I'm interested in the kind of solidarity that buys diapers and sends links to legal aid at 2 a.m. and says, I'll babysit for an hour so you can shower. If that's you, welcome. If you're the one who left, if you are Elliot, keep listening. I learned to speak so you could too. The context? It wasn't a blowout fight. It wasn't betrayal in bed or broken plates. It was accumulation. The way his phone began living face down. The way he laughed too loudly at a text. The way he startled when I said the word registry, like it was a police siren. I thought it was nerves. I made him tea. I said all the sentences women are trained to say. It's okay if you're scared. You don't have to be perfect. We can do this together. I must have said together 100 times like a spell. I didn't know spells need consent to work. A week before he left, we toured a daycare. The director, a woman with the kind of smile that makes you confess, asked, Do you have family in town? I said, Just us. Elliot squeezed my shoulder and said, We've got it. I imagined the Polaroid family we'd become. Him with stubble and sleep-dazed eyes, me with my hair in a crooked bun, the baby between us in a green onesie. The director said there was a wait list, but special circumstances sometimes moved people up. I didn't know special circumstances meant men leaving women who still have to show up to work. If you're here, if you've made it to my door, say hello in the comments. Tell me where you are sitting. Baltimore? Boise? A bus in Milwaukee? A couch in Phoenix with one cushion that always sinks? Tell me. It matters to hear how far the story travels. It matters to know this isn't just my building, my radiator, my hallway light. Press subscribe. Not because numbers cure loneliness, but because building anything alone, especially a life, requires a crowd you can't always see. I'm ready now. The night he left, I learned my voice could split in two. The one that begged and the one that planned. Only one survived. It was a Tuesday in late January, the kind of cold that makes your teeth feel like glass. I'd done a 12-hour at the hospital because Mrs. Denby, who usually covered the admitting desk, took her grandson to an orthodontist appointment. On my way home, I stopped at the corner store for milk and, because I am a cliché, pickles. The cashier, a teenager with chipping navy nail polish, said, You almost done, and nodded toward my belly. Almost, I said. What's her name? She asked. I hesitated. We were still deciding. The girl smiled and said, She'll tell you when you see her. Prophecy. Again. When I opened our apartment door, Elliot was standing in the kitchen, palms flat on the counter. His posture had that braced quality you recognize from storm warnings and breakups. I felt the baby roll like a tide inside me. Hey, I said. He didn't say hey back. I can't, he began, and the rest of the sentence yawned open like an elevator shaft. I thought he meant, I can't do the dishes, or I can't go to my mother's on Saturday, or I can't believe it's this cold. I've never been more wrong. I can't be a father, he said carefully, like a man placing a glass object on a shelf he didn't own. He paused, watched me, maybe hoping I would translate it into something softer. I didn't. He added the sentence that turned the kitchen into a courtroom. I don't want to be a father. I won't give you a movie cry here. What happened was smaller and meaner. The milk slipped from my hand, smacked the floor, and burst in a white slick around my boots. He stared at the mess as if it were proof. "I'll clean it up," I said, because that is what I have always done with spills. He had a bag, not our overnight bag, not the hospital bag with the impossibly tiny socks, a leather duffel I had never seen. He had prepared for this the way you prepare for a business trip. In the duffel, I would later find 3 pressed shirts, a book about negotiation, and a typed sheet labeled Options. It contained bullet points, literal bullets, for how to withdraw from an unwanted pregnancy without legal liability, contest paternity, relocate across state lines, request a private DNA test, refuse to sign the birth certificate, consult the Sovereign Council. At the bottom, there was a name, Pastor Glenn. "Who is Pastor Glenn?" I asked, and he flinched. He does counseling," Elliot said, "at St. Bartholomew's." I'd never seen Elliot in a church except once, for a Christmas concert. He'd clapped off beat and cried quietly during Silent Night. I thought that meant something about his softness. Maybe it did. Maybe softness is the twin of cowardice when you don't train it. Things moved strangely after that. He said he was sorry in 4 different tones. Brisk, pleading, annoyed, and absent. He said, "You're stronger than me." He said, "My dad left. I swore I never would, but I don't know how to stay." I said, "Staying isn't a talent. It's a choice." He looked at me like I'd just spoken a language he hadn't learned. He took the key off his ring, placed it on the counter. The radiator hissed like it had a secret, and then he left. Here's where the conflict spreads, because the absence of one person begets the presence of many systems. The landlord, Ms. Rogan, whose earrings jingled like threats, knocked on my door the next morning. "Word travels," she said, though I hadn't told anyone. "The lease is in both your names. If he's gone, the rent goes up next month, unless you can provide proof of household income to cover the full amount." She slid a printed notice under my mug like a magician. "Congratulations, by the way." She left the congratulations like a dare. At work, the scheduling manager, a man who loved to say team and never learned my last name, sent me an email. "Given your upcoming leave, we'll need you to pick up additional shifts now to cover the gap." I replied, "My doctor advised against doubles this late in pregnancy." He wrote back, "We all have to pitch in." The reply had a smiley face. I have never hated punctuation more. Friends revealed their allegiances. Delilah, who lives 1 floor up and works for legal aid, came running with a grocery bag and a printout of tenants' rights. She sat cross-legged on my rug while my ankles throbbed and said, "We document everything. We gather receipts. We build a fortress of paper." She taught me the hymn of women who have had to prove their pain in triplicate. In the fortress, we stack emails politely, and we CC supervisors. We speak the dialect of "per my last message" and "attached for your review." We learn that paperwork is a weapon you must refuse to be ashamed to wield. Others were less helpful. A coworker named Jeremy, who wears cologne like a confession and has never changed a toner cartridge, cornered me by the vending machines and said, "Maybe this is a blessing. Kids need fathers." I said, "Children need safety. Men are optional." He blinked, then said, but he was honest. He didn't drag it out. I learned that people mistake cruelty for clarity all the time. The money bled. Rent increased by $210. The daycare waitlist fee, a small administrative cost, was $150. My car, my faithful, wheezing Civic, coughed up a check engine light like a surrender flag. The obstetrician's office called to confirm I would bring a support person for my next appointment. I stared at the phone and whispered, "Yes," knowing that person would be me. And then the machine revealed itself. It began with an email forwarded by a cousin who meant well. "Have you heard of the Sovereign Dads Group? They support men who feel trapped by unexpected fatherhood. They have resources to help navigate the legalities." I clicked stupidly. The website was clean, soft colors, testimonials from men with careful hair. Phrases like "bodily autonomy for all" and "freedom to choose fatherhood" wrapped ancient selfishness in TED Talk ribbon. At the bottom, a button. "Connect with a Pastor Glenn." I took screenshots. I sent them to Delilah. She wrote back one word, "Vile." The second email came from Elliot's mother. We had not been close, but we had been polite. She wrote, "Marin, I am so sorry for the distress. You must understand Elliot has never wanted children. It would be best for everyone if you did not list him on the birth certificate. He is not prepared for that responsibility." Prepared. as if parenthood were a test you could reschedule. Meanwhile, there were feelings, the kind that roost in your sternum and tap your bones like a xylophone. I knew rage, yes, shiny and clean. But there was another feeling that took time to name: conspiracy. Not tinfoil hats and whispered codes. I mean the way people conspire, literally breathe together, to make abandonment sound like a preference. The way they lower their voices and tighten their smiles and say, "Well, he told you," as if making a declaration frees you from the gravity of your choices. This is the part nobody warns you about, the slow, grinding insistence that your loneliness is a lifestyle, not a wound. At 32 weeks, my world shrank to the root between my bed, my bathroom, the bus stop, and the hospital. I learned the faces of the morning bus crowd. I learned which stoops were safest to sit on when my hips locked. I learned my baby's sleep schedule: awake whenever I needed rest, quiet whenever I needed proof. I learned that fear is an organ. It swells, it pulses, it demands. Then, at 34 weeks, I opened my mailbox to find a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside, a photocopy of that typed sheet labeled Options, the one with bullet points, now underlined in blue ink. Next to "refused to sign the birth certificate," someone had written, "Don't worry, this is legal." Next to "private DNA test," a phone number. Next to "relocate," a scribble. NC, North Carolina, Elliot's childhood state. The bottom scrawled in smaller handwriting, "See Glenn. He'll protect you." Protect who? From what? I stood on the front steps with the wind slicing my ankles and understood. I had not been left. I had been escorted to an edge by a committee. It happened on a Thursday, 2 weeks earlier than the due date, during a storm that turned the harbor into torn silver. The city went dark in sections, like someone was clicking off lamps one block at a time. I was in the apartment, propped on pillows, writing a list called After the birth certificate, call WICE, after the pediatrician appointment, finalize childcare, after maternity leave, ask for evenings, after the first night alone, cry in the shower. I was trying to make the future feel like a hallway with lights, not an attic with ghosts. Lightning cracked, the room blinked, and then a warm gush. At first, I thought I'd spilled my tea. Then I looked down. My robe darkened. My breath stuttered. Everyone tells you your water might not break like a movie. Mine did. Flood and awe. I had the absurd thought, who will clean this? And then the next thought, sharp as a command, move. The hospital was 9 blocks. My plan had been Delilah driving me. But the storm made streets into rivers, and the power into rumor. My phone flashed 12%. I called Delilah. Straight to voicemail. I called a car service. No drivers available. I called 911. I want to tell you about dispatchers. The woman who answered said her name was Arden, and in 3 seconds, she became the most important stranger I have ever loved. She asked me how far apart the contractions were. I said, "I don't know." She said, "We'll learn together." She told me to lie on my side, to breathe the way I would if I were blowing on hot soup, to keep talking so she could hear the rhythm of my pain. The ambulance, she warned, would be delayed, flooding. She said it like a fact you could outbreathe. Between contractions, I texted Elliot, "Water broke. Storm. Please don't come, just in case you were going to. But if you were, don't." I put the phone down. It rang anyway. "I got your text," he said, and his voice had that marshals calm men use when they want to be commended for not panicking. "Do you need—" he began. "No," I said. "You made your choice. I don't want to be a father," he said again, and the sentence landed differently now. Not like a guillotine, but like a door gently closing somewhere far away. "I heard you," I said. "Goodbye." Another contraction. I made a sound I had never made before. Deep, old, full of women. The radiator hissed a harmony. Arden said, "Listen to me. You are safe. The body knows. You are the room she needs. She. In the storm, with the city dark, a stranger named my child and made the apartment a sanctuary. Then the door knocked. I thought it was the ambulance. It was not. It was a woman in a yellow raincoat that made her look like a buoy. She had my mother's eyes. "Marin?" she asked, breathless. "I'm Lila, Elliot's aunt. We've never met. She looked at my belly, my face. She did not flinch. "I brought soup," she said, as if this were a normal Thursday and the storm were just weather. Arden's voice flowed through the speaker. Who is there with you? Elliot's aunt, I said warily. Can she be calm? Arden asked. Lila laughed, a short, wild sound. No, she said, but I can be useful. She moved fast. Towels, hot water, pillows. I heard what he did, she said softly, tucking a blanket around my knees. I heard once, when I was a girl, my own brother say those words to a woman. I don't want to be a father. It was a script handed down like a family heirloom. I've been waiting my whole life to break it. She looked at me. Let me stand with you while you break it too. The contractions braided together. Time narrowed to breath. Lila counted softly, an old hymn I didn't recognize. Arden spoke like a metronome. In, out, good, again. The building groaned in the wind. Somewhere downstairs, someone yelled at the storm like it owed them money. Between waves, Lila told me what she'd come to say. They had pressured Elliot. Not just the men in the church basement, but his own mother, his uncle, a tidy barber with too many opinions, and a friend who called himself a consultant in family systems. She had found the options paper in the printer tray and snapped a photo before anyone could stop her. She had watched her family teach a man to flee and had decided, finally, to vote for God with her feet. Why tell me? I asked, teeth clenched. Because secrets are a spine for badness, she said, squeezing my shoulder. And because you're not the one who should be ashamed. Sirens approached, distant, then closer. A flash of red at the window said salvation, but my body didn't care. It was happening here. A sharp, primal push called itself inevitable. Marin, Arden said, you're going to feel burning. That's good. That's the world getting wider. Lila's eyes filled but did not spill. You can do this, she said. You are doing this. And then the door opened again. Elliot, dripping, panicked, a man who had run through the flood at the last possible second, breathless with whatever was left of his courage. For a moment, the room held a jury's hush. Even the storm paused at the window to hear what he would say. He started with the oldest sentence. I'm sorry. He moved to the newest. I don't want... Stop, I said sharply. And it worked. Words obeyed. You are not here to want, I said. You are here to witness. Another contraction. The kind that makes you understand myth. I bore down. The apartment tilted into forever. A cry opened somewhere invisible, then closer, then in the center of the room. My daughter's voice, astonishing as sunrise. The sound carved a clean line through everything men had written about obligation and exit. Lila laughed and sobbed in the same breath, Arden's voice crackling with relief through the phone. She's here. Good job, Mama. Good job. Elliot stood 2 steps inside the doorway, hands limp at his sides, eyes wide, his certainty punctured. Do you want to cut the cord? Lila asked him gently, because she is the sort of woman who gives redemption one chance. No more. Elliot shook his head, tears bright but undecided. I can't, he whispered. Lila lifted the scissors. I can, she said, and did. The EMTs burst in moments later, apologies tumbling with equipment. They wrapped us in blankets that smelled like new plastic and thunder. They asked for the father's name. Elliot opened his mouth. I waited for the sentence I'd rehearsed. He doesn't want to be a father. But something else happened. He took a breath and choked on it. He began. Then he looked at our daughter, who had my mouth and his startled eyebrows, and he realized, the only thing you can realize in that moment, if you have a soul, that wanting is irrelevant, that the world has already decided, that love is the checkmate you can refuse but not escape. He didn't sign anything that night, but he also didn't run. Not yet. The machine stalled. Hospitals are loud, even on quiet nights. Our room had the hush of aftershock. My daughter, Amelia, she told me her name with her first steady look, slept with her fist tucked under her cheek like a promise. Lila dozed in a chair by the window, raincoat draped over her like a flag. Elliot sat on the edge of the visitor's couch, pale, damp, not speaking. There are moments you can't narrate because they are more feeling than fact. That night was one. I watched the monitor blink green. I touched Amelia's hair, silk and thundercloud. A nurse with glitter on her nails adjusted the IV and whispered, "You did it, Mama." I wanted to tell her I had done other impossible things, too. Instead, I nodded. The oldest victory salute. Morning arrived muffled and gray. The storm had moved upriver, leaving branches, siren hangovers, and a city that smelled like metal. A social worker named Nina came in with a clipboard and a voice like a warm coat. "We're going to do paperwork," she said. "Birth certificate, insurance, support person. Any questions?" I looked at Elliot. He stared at the floor. Nina followed my gaze and did not flinch. "We'll list what's true," she said, unblinking. "We'll list who shows up. It would be neat to end with a legal signature, a public repentance, a man transformed by a baby's first grip. But I promised you honesty, not neatness. Elliot didn't sign that day. He said he needed time. He cried once, real and ugly. He left an hour later, mumbling about his mother, about the church, about how this wasn't how he saw his life. He kissed Amelia's forehead, too soft, like a tourist at a shrine. Then he was gone, again, not with a slam, but with the quiet of men who believe they can rewrite their absence into a narrative about freedom. Here's the twist you didn't know you were waiting for. He wasn't the last goodbye. 2 days after we came home, a letter slid under my door. It was from Pastor Glenn. It used many words to say one thing. Don't name him. It mentioned mutual well-being, future harmony, spiritual health. It oozed. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Delilah. She wrote, "We're done being polite." She brought coffee and a file folder thicker than a Bible. We filed for child support. We documented abandonment. We recorded the voicemail where he said, "I don't want to be a father." We built the fortress. The machine coughed, spat, and finally, faced with paper and a baby and a woman who would not lower her voice, stopped. Months passed. Not dramatic, not cinematic, merciless and ordinary, which is to say holy. I learned Amelia's laugh, her doctor's preferred diaper brand, the bus driver who would wait when he saw me hustling with the stroller, the neighbor who left bags of outgrown baby clothes on the stairwell with a note, "For your comet." I learned formula measurements and legal terms. I learned a new kind of rage that didn't burn me from the inside. It warmed me like a stove. I learned to reject thank you notes for basic decency. I learned to ask for help without apologizing. I learned that love isn't fragile, and neither am I. One Sunday, months after the storm, I wheeled Amelia down to the harbor. The water was patient. Boats nodded like old men. A woman I'd never seen before stopped and said, "Is she yours?" I said yes. The woman smiled. "I raised mine alone," she said, pointing at a man in his 20s fishing badly with his headphones in. "He thinks he taught himself to swim. We know better." We laughed. Conspirators of a good conspiracy for once. Elliot? He pays, eventually. Not because he wanted to, but because a judge explained math to him. He sends texts on holidays with photos of his dog. He has not apologized in the way I needed. He probably won't. He sees Amelia once a month at a supervised center that smells like disinfectant and crayons. He sits in the chair like a boy in detention. And sometimes, when she giggles, he looks at me with the ache of a man who missed his own life. That is not my burden to carry. My job is to raise a child who knows the truth, that she was wanted by me so loudly the city had to make room. I promised a conspiratorial tone because it matters. There is a quiet, well-funded industry of abandonment. It has websites and pamphlets and men who call themselves counselors. It has scripts. It will tell you leaving is leadership, that refusal is freedom, that you are brave for choosing yourself. It will hand men a parachute and tell women to build wings from receipts. It's real, and it breaks when we talk. It breaks when Aunt Lila's sneak photos. It breaks when dispatchers say your name like a blessing. It breaks when judges read the law aloud like poetry. It breaks when a city bus driver waits. If you've stayed with me this far, you're part of the break. So here is my full-throated ask. Subscribe. Not for me, for the chorus. Share this story with someone sitting in a dark apartment, listening to a radiator hiss, holding a flood they don't know how to name. Comment where you are watching from so I can whisper your city during 3 a.m. feedings. Portland, Miami, Des Moines, El Paso. Tell me your survival trick. Tell me your baby's name. Tell me the phrase the world used to try to shrink you, and I'll make it big again. I'll stretch it until it snaps. The lesson? It's simple, and it's not. Love is not a contract signed by two. It's a practice kept by the one who refuses to abandon. Fatherhood isn't wanting. Motherhood isn't martyrdom. Parenthood is the daily choosing of another's breath over your own comfort. Again, again, again. And when someone says, "I don't want to be a father," hear it for what it is. A confession, not a command. Then build your life around the truth that followed. You did it anyway. Amelia is asleep now, her fist open, her palm soft, the world resting in it like a marble. I'm in the kitchen where the key once shone under the light. The counter is clean. The label on the flour still reads, Flour, all caps, Elliot's old neat letters, a relic and a joke. I keep it, not because I miss him, but because it reminds me. Flour becomes bread when it meets water and heat and hands. Love becomes family when it meets storm and birth and the refusal to leave. I didn't slam the door either. I opened it. To neighbors, to Aunt Lila, to Arden's voice, to Delilah's fortress, to judges and bus drivers and the teenage cashier with navy nails who was right. My daughter told me her name. Subscribe. Say hello. Tell me where you are. I'll bake something for the next woman who shows up on my stoop with a story and a storm. We'll eat warm bread while the city breathes and the machine rusts, and a baby sleeps in a green onesie. And we will plan the future like it belongs to us, because it does. Obrigada por assistir até aqui. You are loved. You are remembered. And if no one has told you today, you can do the impossible. And when you do, I'll be here, whispering your name like a blessing, making space.